So we welcome you to our video chat and encourage you to submit your questions live as we speak. Let's start off with some of the questions that have been submitted. Here's somebody who is speaking about her husband, and she said today, and we'll change her husband's name to something different. Let's call him Fred. Today Fred told me that he didn't like what I made for dinner. I was feeling sorry for myself already because I had just been looking in the mirror, wishing away some cellulite. When he said what he said, I took it as a personal offense instead of seeing it for what it was, which was a personal, honest opinion, as unwelcome as it was. I had the expectation that he should only say things to me that are loving all the time. I also expected him to know that I was feeling crappy about the way I looked and that I wanted a compliment or two. How many different proofs do we need in our lives that when we feel unconditionally loved, we can hear anything? Anything. When we don't feel loved, we can't handle anything. You just proved that here. Here you were looking in the mirror feeling ugly, feeling not worthwhile, not feeling loved, and all he says is that he didn't like dinner. And that becomes the end of the world, and then you feel terrible. Had you felt sufficiently loved, you might have said, well then let's throw it in the trash and start over. Let's make something else. And see, you don't necessarily even have to fix his problem. You could even just say, gee, sorry you didn't like it. It doesn't mean that you have to take care of it. You could even just say, well, there's, cereal in the cupboard. There's cat food in the drawer. You don't have to solve everybody's problems. But you can listen and be compassionate as opposed to irritated. You can be a loving, competent, wonderful human being and have your husband hate what you made for dinner. And it's really kind of irrelevant whether what you made was good or bad. He's just saying he didn't like it. But we do love to blame people for how we feel, don't we? I've done that a few thousand times. You continue. Because I had lots of expectations at that moment, I was very disappointed and unloving. And you're brilliant, of course, to see that. It was about your expectations. It wasn't about what he said, which most people can't identify. It was your expectations. You expected him to know that you felt bad, that you needed to feel loved, that you couldn't hear that you. Of course, the emphasis all being on guess who. You continued. I laid down on the couch and felt sorry for myself, and I left Fred to put the kids to bed. He was mad, which made it, this is very insightful of you, easier for me to feel more sorry for myself. See, the people around us will constantly be making genuine mistakes, which gives us a much easier excuse to blame them for how we feel. So if I feel empty and unloved and bitter and accusing and angry anyway, and nobody around me is making a mistake, everybody's being perfect, it's really hard to blame them. Although, frankly, even if people are being perfect, I can make stuff up. But if people actually make a mistake, like he's doing here, he was mad, then now it's a no-brainer. Now you can say, see, I feel bad because of him. But you're smarter than that, because now after the fact at least, you can identify that he was simply making it easier for you to feel sorry for yourself and to blame him. He was frustrated with me, and he was being, difficult with the kids, which gave me more reasons to be mad at him, and I felt totally justified, which of course we love to do, because who likes to be in a situation look at their own ugly behavior and say, wow, I'm being a selfish pig. How often do you hear that? How often do you hear somebody being selfish and terrible and mean-spirited and stop in the middle of their doing that and say, wow, I'm really being a selfish pig? Almost never. And outside of real love, really close to never. So, but you're seeing this, which is very cool. When we talked about it later, actually you said, when we talked/argued about it later, I could tell that we were both desperate for the other to be loving, and since neither one was, nothing was solved. We both shut up, which was the best thing either of us could have done at the moment, and since I've had some time to think about it, pretty obvious, I mean, since you were arguing then, obviously you weren't having all these brilliant little insights at the time, but you've had time to think about it since. Now that I've had time to think about it, I can see things more clearly, which is why when we're feeling the slightest bit upset, afraid, frustrated, angry, annoyed, anything, we should never, never speak. At least, let me qualify that. Never speak to the person we're frustrated at. We should speak to somebody else who can love us, who can help us orient to what's true, who can help us wake up, who can, frankly, help us grow up, who can help us see clearly. So, really important that we shut up, which you eventually did identify. Two empty people can only hurt each other more. It just makes it worse. And yet, when we're the most empty is when we tend to talk the most. It's when we tend to reach out and lash out and hurt the other person the most. Or in some cases, instead of lashing out, we withdraw. But regrettably, we tend to withdraw angrily, which is another form of lashing out and also hurts. You continue. I know that I'll feel better in the morning, but only because I'll have had sleep, which helps. You identify another precipitating factor in causing conflict, which is that when we feel tired, literally our physical exhaustion saps away the love we feel. Tiredness just kind of leaks it out of us, kind of pokes another hole in our bucket. Sickness does. Depression does. Another little conflict does. Somebody insults us, and all of those things just drain away the real love that we feel. And eventually, you get enough holes in the bucket, you're doomed. And then things start going south. And then you continue. So I'd like to be seen right now for being needy, selfish, manipulative, and a big victim. Now, see, for those of you who are not used to what real love looks like, this is a really nice example of truth-telling. No excuses. No excuses in this entire discussion so far. Notice that she talks about her husband's behavior. She says he was mad, but she says it only in terms of kind of setting a context for what she then did. This is beautiful example of truth-telling. So she says, yeah, he was mad. She could have even said he was a butthead. He was yelling at the kids. But she says it only like in passing. He was mad, but that's only an excuse that I used for being difficult. He did this, but that's irrelevant. That was then what I used to do this. So she made the entire thing about her. Beautiful example of truth-telling. You continue. Also, tonight, I was watching all of the thin people on TV. Yes, they really do. Of course, you may not have seen all the thin people in the world on TV, but I know what you mean. On television, they do have sort of, it's kind of skewed, isn't it? So you're watching all the thin people on TV, feeling sorry for myself over a bowl of Cocoa Puffs, which I've done for the past week or so. And of course, everybody knows Cocoa Puffs make you thinner. And I was making myself feel better with food, which has been a big problem for me for a long time now. I'm looking forward to being more honest about it so that I can make some changes in the near future. And that's the whole purpose of truth-telling. 2 reasons that we tell the truth. One is it creates an opportunity for us to feel unconditionally loved by the people to whom we are telling the truth. And second, as we tell the truth about our mistakes, foolishness, flaws, it creates the opportunity for us to see wiser choices. And what you're doing here is just brilliant. So, congratulations. Now notice, I don't need to tell you a thing to do differently. You're already doing it. You're telling the truth about yourself, and as you feel more loved, you simply will make wiser choices. So there you go. Nice work. Here's a description from a reader about her friend, a 17-year-old friend. The reader's considerably older than that. We'll call her friend Randy. And she's describing this 17-year-old kid that she knows who has been molested, apparently repeatedly in his life, sexually molested, years ago by a school teacher, and then apparently by another school teacher, and this has caused some problems in his life. He has since that time been acting out both sexually and with drugs, and that's made him just that, and with his other acting out behaviors, anger, rebellion, and so on, has made him just impossible for his parents. So his parents couldn't cope and put him in a special school. Don't know exactly what that means, but some kind of school for kids with special needs, and it was a residential school, so it was away from them. But that didn't work out very well either, so now he's living with our pastor, but he's having trouble in school again. Things just aren't working out very well for him. He's acting out sexually, he's angry, and I've told him that he needs to learn to allow other people to love him. And I'm also trying to create an environment where he feels safe and he knows that he can tell me anything that he wants to. My pastor's wife asked if I thought that hugging him was appropriate, and I said, well, sure. She has doubts about that because she's more of a controller, more making him do this and making him do that. And I'm wondering whether Freedom for the Soul, the book Freedom for the Soul, would be the right thing. So let's just kind of go over this. It's you don't need to fixate so much on whether the child was sexually abused, although it's a good idea that he have an opportunity to talk about it, once to you and describe what happened, if he wants to. I wouldn't hold him down and hit him with a bat, until he did, but say, if you want to, tell me what happened with the teacher in the past, or teachers, or whoever. Understanding that I don't feel, and this would be me speaking as though I were you. Understand that I don't have a judgment about that, either about you or about the people who did this, and then explain to him why it is that abusers do this to kids, that they're not monsters, that they don't do this to hurt kids, that they're just empty and alone and dissociated from pretty much every adult on the planet, which is why they go to children, because children are safer. They're easier. They're less critical, less judgmental than adults. And emphasize to him that, as a kid, he's in a position where he's pretty easily used too. So he doesn't need to spend the rest of his life going, well, gee, I should have stopped this either. At the time the kid was, 10 years old. When you're sexually abused by an adult when you're 10, when an adult says, this is what you're going to do when you're 10, there aren't very many 10-year-olds who can say, no, I'm really not. We just do what adults tell us to do. I mean, they've done experiments, in our day where adults have been told by other adults to do things. This is in laboratory experiments in university settings to administer electroshock to laboratory test subjects. And although obviously it wasn't real electrical shocks, but they've done studies where under simulated conditions, people under testing conditions have administered what they thought were fatal shocks to test subjects because they were told to by somebody who was in a position of authority. So, when we're pushed to by somebody in a position of authority, we will cave. We'll do almost anything for a sense of approval. So for a 10-year-old to cave in to the suggestions or commands of an adult, gee, duh, and you might explain that to him. So he doesn't need to feel guilty, he doesn't need to feel shamed or dirty or less worthwhile. He was just used. He was used like an object, like a tool, like a stick or a stone or a chair or a hairbrush by an adult who was just empty and alone. And he needs to just let it go. Now, I realize that's an easy thing for me to say, but when he sees you say it that easily, it can make a big difference to him. Whereas my guess is, up to this point, he has seen people talk about what has gone on in the past with hushed, serious, somber, reverent, very serious tones. And without meaning to, adults, when they do that, actually make it worse. So when they say to a kid, oh, we understand what a terrible thing has happened, well, they just made it more terrible. You can make a thing go away much faster when you just say, look, here's why it happened, and, these were crazy people that did these things. And things like this happen to people all your life. It rains. Rain happens. Stuff happens. And we can't stop things like this. So now the question is, what are we going to do? What was missing in your life was feeling unconditionally loved. And what was missing in this kid's life was not only not feeling loved, or the feeling of love from these teachers who should have cared for him instead of sexually abusing him, but it's pretty clear that he didn't feel loved by his parents either, who then, instead of supporting him emotionally, did what? Shipped him off to a private school, special school, for the, severely damaged. So first he gets abused, then he gets sent to a place where he's told he needs to be fixed because he's, screwed up. Then he's cast off. Sometimes in fixing a kid, we damage the kid more than the original wound hurt them. So explain that to the kid. He's not too young to get it. He's 17, for heaven's sakes. And can you hug him? Well, yeah, you can hug him. And in fact, for the benefit of those listening, I actually spoke to the person who wrote this later, and after recommending that she hug him, she did. And you could see she was worried. Here's this kid who's been sexually, molested, and so she was worried about hugging him. There might be some sexual connotations. Well, grow up. You think people don't know the difference between sexual touching and being hugged by somebody who loves you unconditionally? You really think they don't? You really think people are that stupid? They're not. And so she just hugged him, and she said he just He just clung to her like a little boy, which is what he is. I mean, he's 17 years old, and in some respects, looks like a man, but he's not. He's a little kid, and he wants to be held. So yeah, hug him. I mean, hug him like a baby. And listen to the kid and teach him like we've been talking about. You asked about freedom for the soul. Sure. But I would suggest rather than just hand it to him and say, gee, here, read the book, which would be more of a clinical experience, read it to him. Read it to him and explain it to him as you read it to him. Read it to him out loud, just like, remember I was telling you earlier that he's like a 4-year-old. Well, 4, 6, 8, pick an age. Just like you would read Winnie the Pooh to a 4-year-old. I'll bet this kid hasn't had nearly enough of being read to. And he's going to get a whole lot of feeling loved by your reading out loud to him. And no, at 17 he's not too old to be read out loud to. I still like it when Donna reads out loud to me. So, if I'm not too old for it, he's probably not too old. I'm older than 17, by the way. I know I don't look it, but I really am. And then eventually, as he feels more accepted by you and cared for by you, you can talk to him more and more about taking responsibility for his sexual behavior. Not telling him don't. He doesn't need to hear don't. But just explaining to him what the consequences are to him emotionally and spiritually of him acting out. That it simply won't make him happy. In fact, it'll destroy him. It'll keep him from feeling loved. It'll keep him from being loving. In fact, it will turn him into one of those empty, lonely people who used him. He'll understand that pretty soon. You'll make an impression. Here's somebody who wrote and said, I was shopping for a suit, this is a woman, that I needed for a business meeting. And my partner went with me to help me shop for the suit, and I went from store to store, and I couldn't find what I wanted, and it was driving me crazy. And we went from place to place, and I was getting more and more frustrated. And I found that I was attacking my partner and accusing him of not helping me and not supporting me. And I ruined our entire day together. So, what was happening here, and what can I do differently? So, pretty obvious, I would think, that you're not attacking your partner over a business suit. It's amazing in the first place that your partner, a guy, went with you to shop for clothes. Most guys do not do this. In fact, we maybe need later to check and see if he actually carries a man card in his wallet, because most guys do not do this. But kudos to him for going with you. And here you are, he's coming with you and helping you shop, and you're attacking him when he's coming with you and helping you. Why would you do that? Come on. Attacking is always a response to emptiness and fear. This isn't complicated. So what are you afraid of? You're feeling incompetent. You don't know how to shop for a suit for yourself. You're feeling, this is just virtually a guarantee, you're feeling ugly. You're not feeling pretty. You hate shopping for clothes. Every woman who says that she hates shopping, this is the case. Not most of them, all of them. Women who hate shopping for clothes feel incompetent. They don't know how to look for clothes. They don't like how they look in clothes. They feel ugly. They feel not worthwhile. And the bottom line for all that is what? They don't feel loved. This isn't complicated. And so here you are feeling ugly and incompetent and not lovable. And, well, what are you going to do? Cut the store clerk's head off? You could, except that, oh, much handier, you have your boyfriend with you. So pull out a gun and kill him, which is what you did. But that didn't work out very well. So what can you do? Well, first you can talk to your boyfriend and explain that you were an idiot and that you were unloving and unkind and all of that had nothing to do with him and that you were just feeling unloved and ugly and incompetent. First explain that. But now you need to get a suit. Now, the most important thing, though, out of all of this is that it's about love. So obviously the long-term solution is you need to tell the truth about this. We'll get to the suit in a second. You need to tell the truth about the fact that you feel ugly. Not just ugly physically, but you feel ugly spiritually and emotionally on the inside. And you need to tell that to a bunch of people, and not so that they'll say that this is... Don't look for somebody who will tell you this. Oh, no, you're not. You're pretty. Because that's not going to help. Because, frankly, you don't believe that. So if you were to say to me, Greg, I'm just ugly, because see, women do this all the time. I'm so ugly, and the reason they say it is because, well, a lot of the times they want somebody to say, oh, no, you're pretty. But the problem is, no matter how many people say you're so pretty, they still feel ugly. And so what they do is they lose more and more weight, or they dress more and more pretty. And it doesn't matter how many million people tell them they're pretty. What do? They keep losing more weight and dress prettier and work out, and they still feel ugly. I mean, how many women have been interviewed who've lost 100 pounds and people tell them they're pretty and they still feel ugly? So it's not about how we look on the outside. We need to tell the truth about ourselves to people who tell us that they love us no matter what. That they don't care how we look. So you need a lot of that kind of love. But that's the long-term solution. In the short term, how are you going to get this suit? Find yourself a woman, a professional woman, a businesswoman, and say, look, somebody that you trust, somebody you know, but somebody who will tell you the truth and say, here's my problem. I need to get a business suit, and I need you to dress me up like a mannequin, like a storefront doll, and not spare my feelings. I need you to not tell me, oh, that really looks nice on you, if you don't believe it. So I need to go shopping, and do you have, I don't know, an hour or whatever you think it's going to take to go to a couple of places and help me find something and simply help dress me without telling me, oh, gee, dress me like a Barbie doll. And then just have that person dress you. And then you have to see to the lack of real love in your life. But in the meantime, you got to get a business suit. And taking your boyfriend with you is not the way to do it. Because he's going to say things like, oh, yeah, that really looks good to spare your feelings. That's not going to be helpful. Here's somebody who's asking us live. I was talking just a little bit ago about how sometimes when we get to the place where we're frustrated or anxious or angry or whatever in a conversation, shut up, don't speak. And somebody's saying, I wondered how not speaking when we're angry is different than giving somebody the silent treatment. Sometimes it can take days before I stop feeling annoyed with my spouse. From the outside, I suppose not speaking and the silent treatment could remotely look similar, but they're about as different as the Grand Canyon and a mud puddle. Completely unrelated. The silent treatment is done involuntarily you don't really make a choice. You just go into the silent treatment. It's just, your partner does something you don't like, and you just go into the silent treatment. So it's involuntary. It's done reflexively. You do it in anger or fear. So get the difference now? You do it without thinking. You do it in anger and fear. Whereas the not speaking is quite different. You consciously choose to do it. You either do it not in anger or fear, or you do it in a whole lot less anger or fear. So here are two people who are starting to get angry, or you're starting to get angry, and so what you do is you say, and the other thing is the silent treatment is also done dishonestly. It's not done with clarity. Whereas not speaking is done like this. If I'm with my partner and I can feel the anger building, I say, this is not going well. I can see that I'm not listening very well. And you deserve to be listened to. So rather than continue this, because if we do, I'm just going to continue to not listen well. That's my fault. So rather than do this, let's finish this in, 4 hours. Let's finish this later this afternoon. Let's finish this tomorrow when I'm doing better. Because this isn't going to work. That's the other characteristic, is that there's no blaming. So notice, huge difference. Choosing the not speaking is by choice, much less anger and fear, if any, no blaming, and completely clear. So, whereas the silent treatment, it's all the worst. Not clear, dishonest, blaming, victim-y. It's the toilet. So, quite different. Even though the two of them have the similarity of silence, but that's all. That's all they share. That's just a superficial similarity. Here's somebody who says, I came from a previous marriage that was very abusive, verbally and physically. And now every communication with my ex is hard for me because I find myself desperate for his approval and validation. Should I just never engage him due to my inability to not want his love? He's really empty, and I forget about his abusive ways during the times that he's nice to me, even a little. So my question to you, and I've asked this of many people, is why in the world are you having any conversations with your ex? If you're feeling unconditionally loved and unconditionally loving, then go ahead, talk to your ex. But if you're not feeling unconditionally loved and not feeling unconditionally loving, and talking with your ex provokes feelings of emptiness, fear, anxiety, anger, anything other than love, then what in the world are you doing feeling obligated to talk to this person? But boy, do we get provoked by our exes. We have so much invested in them that they just have to reach out and just touch us, and we feel like we have to reenact our entire marriages with them because they can reach out and touch us, and all that old pain flashes up, and we feel like we have to somehow smooth all those old wounds over again. No, we don't. That's why you divorced him. Divorce, look it up in the dictionary, means separated from, legally. Goodbye. He's now your ex. See? Not your part-time husband, not your recreational husband, not your husband for conflict, your ex-husband. Used to be. So quit it. And then we feel like, well, but it would be unkind not to respond to him. You've got to be joking. So when your ex-husband calls, you say, do you have any important information to convey to me? Something critical, like our daughter has fallen down a well and we haven't seen her for 3 days. That would be important information. But as soon as your ex starts to say, well, I think you, as soon as he says that, I think you go, well, I already know what you think of me. So I don't need to hear anything that follows, I think you. No, ever. I just spent how many years living with you hearing the rest of, I think you. So we're done. If you have anything else you want to tell me that is new, let me know. New information. Otherwise, I'm done. And then if you keep speaking, now watch, people say, but I don't know how to end the conversation. I'm amazed that people don't know how to do this, but I'll show you how you do it. If you're on a cell phone, it's a little red button on the cell phone. I'm not a technical whiz, but I know this. And if you press it, the conversation ends. Actually, my son tells me, I don't usually do it this way, you can actually close the lid and the conversation will end. If you're on a regular phone, you can hang up the headpiece and the conversation will end. That's how you do it. So do that. Here's somebody who says, I have a decent relationship with my brother-in-law as long as things go exactly his way. As soon as you go against him on something, though, he's willing to end the relationship. I do my best to love him, but it's a real challenge. Tell you, if you're in a relationship where somebody holds you hostage, because that's what he's doing, what he's doing is threatening you. It's not overt. It's not, probably not even conscious. But what he's saying is, with his behavior, do things my way, or else. In other words, or else I'll make you feel guilty, or else I might leave you, or else I'll threaten with leaving you, or else I'll whatever. And that's not a relationship. That's being a prisoner, that's being a hostage, that's being a slave. And are you really willing to do that? I mean, if you are, I have yard work that needs to be done. Give me your number, and I'll have you work in my yard, and we'll chain you to a stake out there, and you can just do all my yard work. That's silly. So what you do is, we should always be considerate of other people's opinions, considerate of their feelings. We should always care about them. Really, we should. When somebody says to me, you've hurt my feelings, I want to hear about that. I want to hear what I could do that I might be able to change so that I wouldn't unnecessarily create potential offenses. Really, I'd like to know that. But when somebody says, you have to do this and this and this and this, or I'll be offended. Oh, actually, I don't have to do anything. No, what I have to be is me. And if I have to change who I am in order to be with you, then the solution becomes glaringly obvious. I need to not be with you. Simple. And so you don't need to tell him that you won't have a relationship. All you have to do is continue to be you. But you must be true to you. You must continue to be you. And then if he goes, well, then I guess we just won't do things together. You're right, I guess we won't. So, you know, if he doesn't get his way and he says, well, then I guess I just won't go. Like, for example, he chooses, an example would be, you're going to go to a restaurant, and he says, well, I want to go to this place. And you say, well, I really don't want to go there. He says, well, that's where I want to go. And you say, well, you're welcome to go. And then you let him go. You're not restricting him, but you don't go. You go wherever you choose to go. And then if he says, well, then I'm just not going to go anywhere with you again. Okay. That's his choice. But notice, you didn't control him in any way. You just said you weren't going to one place and he chose to be offended. His call. And if the family says, oh man, you've gone and offended him. No, you didn't. You simply made a choice, and he in turn chose to be offended and angry. But that was his choice. A loving person would never have chosen to do that. He's not loving. That's all. So don't get all excited about it. Here's somebody who says, my partner and I are working on the Real Love and Marriage 40-day workbook. We don't do it every day, but when we do read and talk and share, it's been just amazing. I'm willing to meet and talk more often, but we're both busy and travel and don't always see each other every day. Is there an issue with us doing it over a 3-month period versus every day? Am I just running, and should I ask that we talk and read every day or go with the flow? I would suggest this. If you have a partner who's willing to do the workbook like every other day, and you can do the 40-day workbook, in 90 days, then I'd say be thrilled that you've got a partner who's that cooperative and go with the flow. Really. Where I would be a little more insistent on saying, we really need to do this, is where you've got a partner, for example, who just puts it off just to put it off. I'd rather be watching television. I'd rather be, washing my hair. Because there are a lot of partners who would just rather avoid the issues, who would just rather avoid talking. Then on those occasions, it can be pretty important to say, we really need to do it tonight. We really need to set aside the time. Because victims particularly will tend to avoid talking about the issues until hell freezes over, twice. And it can be pretty important to insist and say, we really need to do this. Otherwise, it will just be put off and off and off. But gosh, if you're meeting every other day, I'd call that just gloriously successful. I've been practicing real love with my children for a while now, but they're still name-calling and fighting with each other. I heard you once say that we should not give them consequences for just not feeling loved. But I don't know how to stop their fighting, so what should I do? We're having daily family meetings, and I'm giving them a ton of unsolicited attention. I'm also making calls to get myself filled up. So what else should I be doing? What you're quoting me as saying, when you're saying that I said we shouldn't give them consequences for just not feeling loved, was that what I really said was we should never give them consequences for not loving us. But we should do something every single time they're not loving toward each other. Every time. Now, that doesn't mean a consequence in the usual sense. That's not like if a child is unloving toward another child, send them to bed, have them sleep with the dogs, run over them with the car. No, what I'm saying is we need to do something. So, for example, if one child speaks in an unloving way to another child, you have to stop what you're doing every time. If you don't, what they learn is this. 80% of the time, it's okay to be unloving, but 1 out of 5 times, Mom will say something. What kind of world is that? Do you see how confusing that is to a kid? So, 9 out of 10 times, I can be snotty and irritable and nasty to my brothers and sisters, but 1 out of 10 times, because that's about what it works out to with most kids, or even less. It's 1 out of 20 times. They'll say snotty little nasty things to each other all day long, and then 1 out of 20, 1 out of 30 times, in comes Mom and says, now, stop that. And the kid's going, this is like roulette. Once in a blue moon, Mom comes in and decides that time it wasn't okay. So the kid's thinking, this isn't about being unkind. This is a crapshoot. So there's no rules to this. There's no order. The kid can't even figure this out. So we have to say something every time we hear an unkindness spoken from one child to another. Now, what do? We don't come in and say, stop it, and you need to read the parenting to learn more and more about what to say. But we can say something. So just one example would be, so when a child says something snotty to the other child, you stop and you say, so would you translate that for me? So what you just said to your brother, translate what that means for me in English. What are you really saying to your brother? Well, I just told him, give me back that brush. No. What does that translate into? And the kid, of course, won't know what you're talking about. But then you need to enact that for the child. So then you need to reach out and you need to do to the child who was being snotty just what he did to his brother. So reach out and push him with your hand, not in anger, just to simulate what he did, and say, now give me that. I said, now, so you say to the child, now in this moment, do you feel like I'm caring about your happiness and that I love you a lot? Or do you feel like I don't love you? Which? Oh, there isn't a kid on the planet who doesn't get that point. And so the kid's going to say, well, I'm not. You feeling loved? Well, no. And so what are you hearing me say? And you help the kid, take your time, until the kid says, when I push you or when I talk to you like that, you hear me say, I don't love you. So if that's what you hear me say, what does your brother hear when you talk to him like that? And so that's just one way of that you can respond when a child is unkind, to help them see that what they're saying is, I don't love you. And boy, does it help them reframe what they're doing. And it really helps them change the way they live. Because no longer do they feel irresponsible when they behave like selfish little pigs. They need to see, I was being a selfish little pig and telling my brother that I don't love him. When they can say that, you can move on. You don't tell them stop, but they say, I see, I was being a selfish little pig and telling my brother I don't love him. Thank you. Now, next. And then you move on with what you were doing. They can't continue to behave like pigs and see it and keep doing it. That they will eventually quit it. No kidding. Here's somebody who says, I'm married to a woman who acts like a victim all the time. I try to talk to her about real love. I've tried to just live real love with her for like 2 years now. Nothing, no response. All she wants to do is take the credit cards and spend money and talk to her friends and talk about how other people are awful and her life is awful and she doesn't have enough money and I don't do enough this and I don't do enough that and nobody takes care of her, nobody does enough for her. Does this sound victim-y enough? She's a victim all the time, no matter what I do for her, no matter what anybody does for her. I've asked her to read the marriage book by herself. I've asked her to read the marriage book with me. No. I've asked her to do the 40-day workbook with me. No. She's just utterly absorbed in being a selfish victim. And I don't know what to do to help her. Now, notice that you're talking here about what you can do to help her, which is great. Because as long as your attitude is, what can you do to help her be a happier person, that will help you a ton in knowing how to respond to her. It's obvious that she's not happy. Victims are never happy. I mean, listen to her. Nobody ever helps me. Nobody ever this. Nobody. Victims just whine and cry and complain all the time because they're endlessly unhappy. And as long as they're victims, they never can be happy because their whole lives depend on other people doing enough for them. Well, other people never will be. How do I know? Because they'll never be happy until everybody around them is flawless. Well, that ain't going to happen. Not in this life. So they're endlessly crying and whining and complaining. Your marriage is not happy. So what do you got to lose here? Everything you've done to this point hasn't worked. You got nothing to lose. So why not take some action? Now, normally, I recommend that we stay out of other people's business. Normally, I say other people's mistakes are none of our business. This is a little different. So, be careful about applying this to other people too often. But here's a woman who is miserable and alone and unhappy, and if you don't help her, who will? The mailman isn't going to. Her parents aren't going to. Her parents got her where she is. There's nobody on the planet who's going to help this miserable victim unless it's you. So, something's got to be done. So why let her stay in this victim-y awful place? So I suggest that rather than begging her and rather than waiting for her to get it, that you tell her what you're going to do. And that you tell her that you are going to talk to her about the things that matter to you every day. Now notice, you're not making her do anything. But you live in the same house with her, and you can tell her what you are going to do. Then she can choose whatever she's going to do. You tell her, I am going to be talking to you about the principles that matter to me and that are making me happy, and I'm going to talk to you about these principles every day. Tell her, in fact, that you're going to do the 40 days with her. So, you start at day 1, and when it says, talk with your partner about blank, 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 you sit down and you talk with her. When normally you would just sit at the kitchen table and say nothing, which is pretty easy to do with a victim, or where you would normally just sit and listen to her complain, you pull out the book and you go down to the first exercise and you answer it with her. And you say, now I'd like to talk to you about something. And you start talking to her. And when it gets to the place where you ask your partner a question, you ask her the question that's in the book. And you tell her that you're going to sit with her and you're going to share with her the answers and that you're going to ask the questions of her. And that you will keep asking her the questions until she chooses to answer. Now, she can always get up and choose to walk into the next room. But the next day, you're going to sit down and you're going to try again. This may sound almost naggy and intrusive, but the place that she's at in her life is deadly. Suppose that she were dying, literally dying, physically dying, and that the required treatment to save her life, and there are illnesses like this, so I'm not making up some goofy disease, that the required treatment to save her life were to get her off the bed, up out of bed, off her backside, and encourage her to get up and exercise. Get up and walk and go outside and get her off her feet and get her moving. What if that were the required exercise and she said, well, I don't want to? Would you let her just sit in bed and die, or would you sit down next to her and physically help her get to a sitting position and help her stand up and, shall we say, strongly encourage her to take a walk outside? You know, if you really care about your partner, you'd probably at least a few times encourage her, stand at her side, support her physically around the waist, and help her walk outside. Why? To save her life. Even if she whined, complained, resisted, moaned, attacked you about it, and acted like a victim. Because it's a matter of life and death. And that's where she is now. Emotionally and spiritually speaking, this woman's dead. She's at the mercy of every little thing that happens in life. Somebody does something she doesn't like, she's miserable. Somebody doesn't do something she wants, she's miserable. Actually, it doesn't matter what's going on, she's miserable. She whines and complains all day long. Somebody has to be willing to take the risk of incurring this woman's wrath and pushing her, as it were, to do something different. Something different than what's gotten her to this place in her life, which is a living hell. She's dying of victimhood, and somebody has to get her off her backside. And you haven't done this to this place, to this point in her life, because you're afraid. because you're afraid of her. Almost everybody is afraid of victims, because the closer you get to pushing a victim, the angrier they get. Remember, victims already claim to be wounded and victimized and everything's horrible. And if you push a victim a little bit to take responsibility and push them to do the right thing, oh, baby, then they really get nasty. And she's been acting like a victim around you precisely so that you will back off. Donna and I have recently been working with a lady. Well, actually for some time, but a lady who we helped move into a new home. She'd been out in the street, she'd been homeless, long story, mess of a woman. And we've spent, a lot of hours lately trying to help her move into a new home, to get furniture, but she's such a victim that this is, her 5th home in 6 months. But we've helped her get her own place and helped furnish it and get the electricity turned on and a lot of stuff. But one of the things that we've been trying to impress upon her is that she can't just live as she's lived in the past, which is completely irresponsibly. This woman never stops complaining. And because she's such a miserable human being to work with, every place she's lived in the past, everybody's thrown her out. So I sat down and explained to her that she had to be more fiscally responsible. So we'd walk into the house, for example, and she'd have the heat up to 85 degrees. And so I'd go in and turn the thermostat down and tell her she had to be more responsible, or she couldn't afford the heating bill, and then she'd be thrown out again. Well, so the last time I did that and explained to her that she had to be responsible, victims will always try to get you to stop teaching them to be responsible. She stood up and started screaming at me and swearing at me and threatened to call the cops and throw me out of the house and ordered me out onto the porch. And I just refused to move and said, you can scream and swear and curse at me and threaten me, and I'm going to stand right here and teach you what you need to learn so that you're not thrown out, because I care enough about you to help you save your life. That's why I'm here, because I care about you. And it took a while, but she finally caught on. And she's still in the house, and she turned the heat down. And she's actually even lately taken to saying thank you, which has been stunning. So what I'm suggesting is that at this point, avoiding your wife's victimhood and her anger is only keeping both of you dead. So what have you got to lose? You may have to push her a little bit. She might get mad at you, but, frankly, so what? So try a little truth-telling. Try even pushing her a little bit, but you absolutely can't do this if you feel empty and afraid and angry yourself. So I wish you well with this. It is not an easy road to walk. I understand that. So it's been a delightful Tuesday with all of you. We look forward to being with you again in a week. Thrilled, in fact. And in the meantime, remember that it's always about real love. We'll see you then.